Any second here. Okay, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the JDW Sports Talk Show. Warrior fans, welcome. We have a very special guest here today, in Daniel Kelly. He has his own website, former NFL scout. He knows his stuff, without the fluff, no BS. He's true to his word, not some kind of like he's not trying to write any narrative like the media. He's telling you how it is. He's telling you through his NFL lens glasses that he will talk about here today. So, Daniel Kelly, introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I appreciate you coming on. Just introduce yourself, where they can find you, all that stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jason, for having me on tonight. And thank you to everybody who's watching and listening to this show. And I guess where you can find me right now in the current day is spending about every minute of my life just putting reports up on my NFL draft website, firstroundmock.com. That's my labor of love that I work on with putting up the top prospects in each draft class starting last year going into this year. And of course, on Twitter, I'm definitely very easy to find, even easier to find for my critics at First Round Mock. And we always have a lot of fun on there. And I do love all the fans. And the thing I love most about is the passion, whether I agree or disagree, they agree or disagree. It's just the passion we all share for this great game is what makes this draft season so incredible to begin with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. I love football, but the moment I sat down and tried to watch 12, 13 hours of tape, I noticed, I just want to enjoy it. But this guy right here, he does all the hard work for us, so we don't have to do it. And, great man. He's done his work. So I want to ask a little bit about your process in becoming a scout. So I know, I always thought about like, where do you start? How do you even get your foot in the door? Do you have to know people? And especially back in the day, when you were becoming a scout, there was no such thing as social media. So it had to be that much more difficult to just get your name out there and try to get some kind of credibility out there. So, just something out there. How was that process like for you?
Well, there was no internet hardly even. Yeah, well, I guess it just started. But, the process for me was a little bit different. I've kind of come from the path less traveled. I grew up in Minnesota in a small town as a diehard fan of the Washington Redskins. And it was just like people say, well, why the Redskins? Well, living in Minnesota was like a magnet to a refrigerator. I was an 8-year-old kid, love at first sight. John Reagan, Super Bowl 17, 4th and 1, boom, done. I was hooked. My grandma bought me a little, that's before they even had an NFL shop. She bought me a little red t-shirt with screen print with a 44 in the front and the back that said Reagan's. And that was my first jersey for my grandmother. So, I had this tremendous passion, Jason, to our listeners for the game. And this is specifically for the Washington Redskins. My bedroom was like a Redskins shrine. You couldn't even see the color of the paint of the walls of my room, much to my dad's, disappointment. He's like, we're going to, now, of course, I use duct tape on the back of my posters and everything. So I ripped the paint right off the walls. So he loved that. He's like, what are we going to do here when we repaint this room when you leave? I'm like, I don't know. But I was the kid that, went to the sports bar with my grandmother every week. They watched the Redskins off the big, the huge, big satellite dishes. They used to record the games. To this day, my wife's like, what is in that container? I have a tote containing every Washington Redskins victory from 1984 until 1992 on VHS tape that I recorded every week. I'd go. I was way ahead of the NFL Network. There was no off season for me. I just watched the games on tape. I had my grandma record all the pregame shows on CBS, NBC, all the different pregame shows, and I'd watch them during the off season. I couldn't get enough of football, Jason. I read all the pro previews. I'd throw my homework in the trash and just and study the previews. And so I had this tremendous passion. It just grew and grew. And I wanted to play linebacker at Penn State, but I was like 130 pounds soaking wet, as even in high school. I could eat a large pizza and wouldn't gain a pound, kind of like the old Browns receiver Webster Slaughter. I just couldn't gain any weight. And, I was taking Weight Gainer 2200 from GNC in my orange juice every day. It didn't matter. But I played 1 year of high school football. And I think this is important for our listeners to catch. I was so bad at playing football that I was the only kid on my football team that didn't have enough playing time to earn a letter jacket. I mean, that's how bad I was. My claim to fame, Jason, was I think we were down like 40-50 to nothing. There was like 30 seconds left in the game. Coach yelled at me, "Okay, Kelly, get in there." It was like a scene right out of the movie Rudy. It was, and there I run in there. I didn't even know the plays. Hey, Kelly, put on your helmet. Don't forget your helmet. Everybody's laughing. I run in there and I'm thinking to myself, oh, please just run out the clock, take a knee. Nope. The quarterback, you know where this is headed. The quarterback drops back. The shoulders tilt back. You can just see it's going to be a deep pass. I'm playing center field, free safety. Sure enough, it's like a Disney movie. The ball's spinning in the air, coming towards me in slow motion, it felt like. And I put my hands up to make the interception. The thing goes right through my hands, bounces off my helmet, and goes to the ground. That's how bad I was at. But, I had this tremendous passion. I mean, I went to Super Bowl 26 when Washington beat Buffalo, was hoarse by halftime. I mean, that's my story is being a fan, getting into the NFL. And so here I am at 17 years old, Jason, and my parents, kind of like you asked, how do you get started in being a scout? What do you do? And for me, it was kind of like scouting found me. Because my parents gave me a book for my 17th birthday. It was Tony Rizzano's Secrets of NFL Scout. Tony Rizzano, of course, was the personnel director under Bill Walsh for the 49ers dynasty back in the 80s. And this was a whole book about scouting. And there was no online schools. There was nothing there was a little tiny book. It was called The Drugstore List by Jerry Jones, not the owner of the Cowboys, but a different Jerry Jones. It was like one-liners on players. That was the only thing out there really for the draft at that time you get your hands on. So I read this book. I couldn't put it down. I said, this is what I want to be. I want to be an NFL scout. So I just started recording games. That's how I did it, and started writing reports, and kind of went by Rizzano's kind of his, different templates, scouting templates and reports, and kind of just put something together. And long story short, I ended up sending in I was 17 at the time, my first 75-page draft scouting report to then Redskins general manager Charlie Casserly, trying to get an internship. And, he wrote back, hey, thank you. It was the year Desmond Howard came out, and I put a Xerox a copy of Sports Illustrated, with Desmond Howard with the Heisman pose, on the front cover of the thing, and send it in. He said, well, thanks. You're still too young. Check back with us after our first year of college. I was so into scouting that I barely passed through high school. My parents were, my dad was, his dream for me was to go to college. My mom was a valedictorian. There was a lot of pressure on both sides. We went to parent-teacher conferences. The teachers would say, if Dan here would even spend a tenth of his time on his homework as he was in Washington Redskins, he'd be a straight A student. Needless to say, the ride home wasn't too pleasant, but, just this passion built. And, I just wrote more and more scouting reports. And then, I went into the real world and found myself working at Allstate Insurance. 21, I went to a small community college for about 6 months, dropped all that, failed out. And that's an important part of the story as far as how I got there is, here I'm at Allstate Insurance, telemarketing for insurance leads. And an ad comes on the local KFAN in Minneapolis sports radio show. They said, hey, call down. The first 32 callers call in. You'll represent the team on the air. Minnesota Vikings come into the headquarters mock draft. Bring a friend. The first 32 callers call now. And of course, I have 9 open phone lines. So I'm just like, I'm dialing like a maniac. And they said, hey, hello, KFAN radio. Who's this? I said, this is Daniel Kelly. They said, congratulations, you're the first caller. Of course, I had 9 open phone lines. All 9 were ringing at the same time. They said, you're going to represent the Jacksonville Jaguars on the air in our mock draft. Bring a friend. You have lunch. So I grabbed all my old scouting reports I did, for the Redskins, and took my buddy Josh from my high school, and we headed into the Minnesota Vikings headquarters. And I walked in there, and at the time I was just scared of public speaking. Believe it or not, I was the kid that my knees shook when I had to read a book report in front of class, and so I go up to the podium. And there's this big microphone, and they just like you hear it, and they said, okay, with the this was 1995, the first year of the Jaguars, the expansion team. They said, with the first pick in the 1995 draft, the Jacksonville Jaguars select, and I reached into the microphone. I said, Tony Boselli, offensive tackle, USC. And out of the corner of my eye, I see Tony Dungy. Now, Colts fans, we all know Tony Dungy, right? Well, this is back before, this is back. Who doesn't know Tony Dungy? Who doesn't love him? This is back before, of course, he was with the Colts. This is the time when he was a defensive coordinator, Denny Green at the Minnesota Vikings. And of course, back then he wasn't world famous or on TV. So I approached he had a little table there, and I approached him after I, said what I said on the radio. And I said, Coach Dungy, I'm Daniel Kelly. I've done these scouting reports. Would you please, sir, be willing to take a look at these? And he said, sure. And he just looked right at me, and he took them from me and opened up the pages and sat there and looked at them. And he said, this stuff is actually pretty good. He goes, how would you feel about coming to my office next week? We could sit down and we could talk, and I could pull some of my old reports from Blesto with the Chiefs when I was back there, and we could talk about the players and see how you have them rated, and how would that feel? I'm like, yeah. So in I went. That turned into be a 6-month unpaid informal internship with Coach Dungy. Of course, he left for Tampa Bay right after that for the Buccaneers job. I went back into the real world, went through a real serious breakup, ended up couch surfing for a while, selling Kirby vacuum cleaners door to door. He was, down in Tampa doing his thing. And then I found myself, Jason, to our listeners, at 24 years old, working at Bank America Mortgage as a loan officer. And I was in this real estate law class, and I'm sitting here thinking, what am I doing here? My dream is to be an NFL scout. It's better to go for it and not get it, opposed to always, wondering what could have been. And so, I started thinking of all these ideas, and I had a little satellite dish, from DirecTV, and I could, get this college football in a package, subscribe to that, stop at Target, buy a bunch of pens and paper. I did all that. And what it turned into was me working around the clock back then, even, working at the bank all day as a loan, officer and mortgages, and then going home and moonlighting as a scout. And it turned into be this huge, big pile of papers. And I ended up turning that into a 350-page self-published NFL 1998 draft guide. And I included all my notes in that, and then they published. It was 3 copies to every team in the NFL, and I personalized it, one to every head coach, one to every director of player personnel, one to every head coach. Spent like $2,500, I think it was, to do that, $2,300, and then I ended up getting a overnight mail account too, like a Airborne Express was the name of the company at the time, and sent out these 10-pound boxes with no guarantees, 3 copies to every team in the NFL as my resume. It took every dime I had. The next 2 months rent, I couldn't pay my rent. I soaked that. I mean, when I say go for it, I mean, wave the punter off the field, go. I mean, I had no backup, no plan, no credit cards, no savings, nobody to fall back on, no family to fall back, nothing. So I put all my hopes and dreams in these boxes and sent them out across the NFL and waited to see what would happen. And that's the first team to call me was the New Orleans Saints. They said, Coach Mike Ditka really liked my book. They thought maybe there was a position opening in there to be a Midwest scout in the Big Ten, and with Bruce Larman, who was a college scouting director down there at the time. That fell through. My buddy at the bank said, be patient. He said, somebody else with as much passion as Mike Ditka is going to call you. I'm like, oh, come on, dude. I said, nah, and sure enough, a couple of days later, I got a call from a text from Scott Pioli with the New York Jets. It said, please call. And so I called him, and he said, listen, Bill being Bill Parcells, really likes your book. And we have a position open. It's not a high paying position. It's a pro personnel assistant to start. Is that something you think you'd be interested in? I'm like, absolutely. So, long story short, I ended up flying out to New York in a 2-day marathon interview. And it was, that's kind of my background in a nutshell. But, there's just the whole driver of the whole thing was just this insatiable, burning passion for the game that, I literally ate, slept, and breathed football from the time I was, 8 years old on. It just consumed me.
Yeah, man, that's very inspirational. Truly, you always hear about someone, the ones who make it, they're always putting everything they possibly can into it because they have. It's not that they have no other choice, but that's them. That's what they work towards, and they know deep inside their hearts that that's what they want. So that's very inspirational, and honestly, very inspirational. So,
thank you.
And I know everyone's gonna bring up, the time, where you have written in your article on your page, about the time you looked Bill Belichick straight into his eyes about getting, when you went out for that interview. Tell me how that was like looking into his eyes like that.
It was really intense. It's intense looking into our TV screens, looking at them. Yeah, here I'm sitting. It's the end of my interview, and like I said, it was a 2-day marathon. I interviewed with everybody in the who's who of the. There was so many big names with the Jets back then. And the assistant coaches were all there. Eric Mangini, Romeo Crennel, Charlie Weiss, Al Groh. All these different great coaches, Dan Henning, so I've went through talking with all these different coaches and personnel people. And, my interview came down, Jason, they asked me to evaluate a football player of theirs on their team and asked me to go into the defensive line room and watch, film on him and do the report right there. They gave me like 2 hours to do it. And, so I went in there and did the report. And then, Scott Pioli, who was the director of, pro scouting at the time with the Jets, who turned out to be Bill Parcells' son-in-law later on. He called me in his office and said, "Hey, Dan, bring 3 copies of your report when you're done." I'm like, 3? I'm like, okay, yeah, no problem. Yes, sir, no problem. And so I brought him like, okay, Scott, me, and who? It's my first time. Like, please don't let it be the player. I'm thinking they're calling the player up from the locker room. Rick Lyle, this big defensive end, is going to come walking through the door at 6'6" or whatever he was. Just soaking wet from practice, or just looking like he's going to run me over. I'm like, nah, please don't let it be him. So I sit down. Now Scott Pioli's office is much like we see in the movie Draft Day. You look out the window, you see the pristine practice fields, the fluorescent yellow goalpost. I mean, it's a whole scene. And there's one chair sitting to the right of his desk, and that's where he asked me to have a seat. There's one chair to my left, and that's currently vacant in this scenario. And then there's Scott Pioli sitting behind his desk. Okay, so I have a seat. He said, "Do you have the reports, Dan?" I said, "Yeah." So I handed him 3 reports, and he picks up his phone. He says, "Okay, he's in here. You want to join us?" "Okay, thanks. Bye." I'm like, oh. Who's that going to be, right? And all of a sudden, the door opens, and it's Bill Belichick. And this is a guy that I had watched as a fan growing up, back with the Giants. Even the guy that won the Super Bowls with Bill Parcells with the Giants, the inventor of the umbrella zone concept. As far as coverage is concerned. And he walks in, he introduced himself. I'm like, yes, Coach Belichick, I know who you are. He sits down, and Pioli hands one copy of a report to him and one to me, and it's like a paragraph. Okay, I have read one paragraph. And Belichick has these readers he puts on, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at him, kind of by looking at Scott, looking at Bill. I'm looking at it felt like a Snickers commercial. I mean, it's like not going anywhere for a while. I'm like, don't let him see you sweat, type of thing. And finally, the tension breaks, and Belichick says, he takes his readers off. He looks up at me. He says, "So, Daniel," he says, "tell me about your tape collection, your film, your games you've taped. Tell me a little bit about that." I say, "Absolutely, sir." I said, "I've recorded all the games I possibly could off DirecTV. That's what I've used for all my reports in this draft book that I sent in to you guys. I feel like to me the tape doesn't lie. I try to get as much football tape as I possibly get my hands on and consume it and write these reports based on the film and what I'm seeing on the film and stuff." And I just kind of talked about that for a minute. And then he went into detail what they asked Rick Lyle to do in their defense. It was a 34 defense. He was a little bit bigger defensive end. He explained how in a 34 they asked defensive ends to do something a little bit differently than a 43 defensive end, being a 4-3. They asked the 34 end to hold up the point of attack. The linebackers can scrape in and make plays and everything. And he kind of explained that for a minute. And then he hit me with the question. He looked. All of a sudden, he stopped actually, and he just stared at me. And I just stared back at him for probably a good 30 seconds. and neither of us blinked. And he says, "So tell me something, Dan." He said, "What would an opportunity mean to you in the National Football League?" And I stared back at him without blinking and said, "Coach, it will mean everything to me. I will do whatever it takes to succeed." And I just stared at him. And he stared at me for a good another 30 seconds. It didn't say a word. And I didn't say anything, and I didn't blink. And he said, "Okay." He said, "Well, thank you for coming out to New York." And there was a guy staying at the door. He said, he'll show you to the airport, and we thank you for coming out here. And I'm thinking, okay, are we forgetting something here? I was like, like I'm leaving. There's no job offer, right? I'm leaving. I'm going back to they dropped me off at the Marriott next to, Long Island to get my bags. I'm thinking as I walked down the hallway to get my bags, I'm like tearing up. I got tears coming. I'm like, what just happened there? It was like one of those moments like, okay, and so 2 weeks went by and, and I didn't hear a word. And all of a sudden, Sunday night, the phone rings and it's Scott Pioli, and he says to me, he goes, Bill's reached a decision on you. And I still get a little emotional to this day, a lot emotional actually, because it was an incredible moment. It's everything you see with the players when the players break down and cry, and it's one of those moments. And he says it's a moment I was waiting my whole life for. And he says, well, he goes, I need to talk to you about a couple things first. He said, number one, he goes, I was able to get $21,000 a year approved for you. I know that's not a lot of money. He said, but that's kind of how it works. And I've also gotten a couple season tickets thrown in for you, as well as a Hofstra, University, a meal card. And I goes, I know you're newly married, which I was at the time, to my first wife. And he said, marriage, I mean, it's the NFL is tough on marriage, is what he said. He said, overtime in the NFL is not, optional. It's mandatory. He said, so it can be really tough on a new marriage. And so if you need some time to think about it and whatnot, talk to your wife, because I'd understand. And I said, Scott, I don't need any time to talk, to think about this. I mean, I'd already talked it out, of course, and everything. I said, I don't need any time. I said, are you asking? And he said, I am. And I said, I accept. And he says, well, congratulations. With that said, you're the newest member of the New York Jets.
That's surreal, man. And I can just see the passion in you, and it truly inspires me. Whether I, one day do get deeper into football, it truly inspires me for whatever I do. It's just, for anyone out there, this kind of a story, this is what it takes. It takes all those long days, and I'm sure you had those days where you didn't want to sit there for hours and hours and watch film, but you did anyways because you love it and it's part of the process. And that's what it took to get in front of Bill Belichick, to have that opportunity. So truly, thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. Truly appreciate it. So other than the big names, Bill Belichick, Tony Dungy, some of those guys, other than some of those guys, is there someone that you can recall on your way up that kind of took you under the wing, that kind of showed you, the ropes a little bit more, someone that's just not mentioned a lot, or not a lot of people know? Do you have someone like that, or not really?
My NFL mentor, Lionel Vitale, is a person I would point to. It's really incredible because, the movie The Replacements, and I got to know him during my time at the Jets. The movie The Replacements, he actually played on that team. He was a running back on that team back for the Washington Redskins. And ironically, he had the biggest game of his career when I was 13 years old, playing for the Redskins against the Giants. I remember watching the game on my birthday, my 13th birthday. So when they walked me into the place when I was 24 years old, they took me into the college scouting room. They said, I want you to meet. They introduced me to everybody. And this is Lionel Vitale. And I'm like, what? I'm like, and we just kind of took to each other from day one. And he took me under his wing, and he really, really took to me, and I took to him. And he would stand by me at practice. He would, invite me into the film room and tell me kind of what he's seeing. He would, and this guy was, he was very, very good at what he did, and ended up going on to end up winning Super Bowls. He had won a couple as a player, and he also won Super Bowls with the Patriots. He became Belichick's most trusted, closest talent evaluator in the first couple of Super Bowls in New England. He had since gone on to become director of player personnel with the Atlanta Falcons, director of college scouting with the Dallas Cowboys. And so he really did take me under his wing, and somebody that, a name that a lot of people don't know that was behind the scenes, but a man who taught me so much about evaluating and not just about the film, but he gave me a PhD in what to look for in terms of the other stuff, the character stuff. He was a criminal justice background guy himself. The cornerstone of the Jets operation was information gathering. Gather it, but never give it. That's a big part of the evaluation process. If you see my reports on my drafts and first round mock, you'll see like Caleb Williams, I go into a great detail about character and all these different things and links, incredible sources and different things. A lot of that stuff I learned the importance of from Lionel. And, he just kind of taught me, what to look for, what kind of questions to ask, the interview process of the combine, all the different things that go into this, what to look for in players, what kind of players to look for. He would tell me, just stick with the dynamic ones is what he would always tell me. You want to look for the guys that make a difference, and so I've spent thousands, literally, I'm not even exaggerating. I've spent thousands of hours on the phone with him over the last 20 years, even since I've been out of the league. And he's really afforded me an education, like I call it an NFL PhD, that I would never gotten anywhere else, because this is the guy who sat at the table with Arthur Blank. This is the guy that sat at the table with Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones. So this is a guy that's been with Ozzie Newsome, one of his scouts in Baltimore, who might be the only guy to ever go in the Hall of Fame as a player and executive one day. This is the guy that, was right there with Bill Belichick, picking the players and stuff, being a scout and stuff. So just a wealth of information is just my wife is like another thing you're going to mention. Like I always mention his little sayings and different things that he's taught me, but he really has taken an interest in me and him. And we've just been like two brothers throughout the entire process, and somebody who's really gone all his way. I mean, he would call me up and be like, like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I said, I knew this. I said, what are you doing? He goes, well, I had dinner with Jerry Jones. It's just incredible stuff. And just the way he taught me and the things that he taught me and how he taught me and just the compassion and care and just the time he's invested in me is just incredible to me. I look back and I'm like, I'm just a kid from Minnesota, from a small town. And it's just the way that he's been with me has been incredible.
Yeah, I always feel like there's someone that's, that no one talks about, that no one really knows. Well,
Good
not that they
insight.
didn't know them, but there's always someone that has that big impact that it's not that they don't deserve that, I'm not really sure what you call it, but those are the ones that sometimes mean a little more. They mean a little extra. So I thought it was worth the ask. So
yeah, that's a great question. I've been on hundreds of shows, and that's something nobody's ever asked me. That's a great question.
okay, so I think it's time to move on into some Colt stuff. You ready for some Colt stuff? So
I'm ready. I'm ready.
we already know that you have a little bit of beef with Colts Nation, as I do too. But Anthony Richardson, I bet you can't wait. You can't wait to dive into him. So Anthony Richardson, is he the future? Can he be the guy that brings the Colts to a Super Bowl? He can, but tell me why or why not you think Anthony Richardson can do it.
He can't do it.
Okay.
He can't do it. I had a 5th round grade on Anthony Richardson coming out of Florida. And by the way, I love the Colts Nation. Love Indianapolis. I've spent a lot of time at the Steak and Shake back in the day. Love it. Ate dinner a few times with the Jet staff at St. Elmo's Steakhouse. Been to Champ Sports Bar. Love the city. Love the place. Love the facility over at the stadium and stuff. And so with that said, Anthony Richardson, no. To me, it was just a tremendous reach by the Colts organization to take him. I was actually really surprised. And he's a guy that, I just couldn't believe it. I mean, going into the draft, I think 85.2% of draft platforms out there on NFLmockdraftdatabase.com had him ranked as a 1st round grade. I couldn't see it on film. And I evaluated every single snap Richardson took his last season at Florida with the Gators. And to me, he was nothing more than a glorified option quarterback. And his whole game was built off play action. And, that only really works if you're a great runner, and he's not. I mean, he's tough as nails. Yes, I will not take that away from him. He's a very tough runner. He's a 6'4", 244-pound kid that, he definitely runs like he means it, but he's just not one of those, he's not Michael Vick. He's not Justin Fields as a runner. He's not Lamar Jackson, and so, I went on Fox Sports Radio prior to the draft last year with Jason McIntyre and, put that 5th round bust. I said he was going to be a bust on his show. Great on him. And, he's not the future. And, it's just really concerning to me, what they've done, with him and what the future looks like him, because the biggest concern that I had coming out in a nutshell was, and this is true for all quarterbacks. I had the same concern with Trey Lance. I have concern with quarterbacks who come out of college who are, A, an athlete, and B, a quarterback, and that's what Richardson is. This is a guy who's learning to play the quarterback position. That's how it looks on film, the finer details of the quarterback position. And this is not just a Daniel Kelly thing. And that's the thing that surprised me about this. This is something that, The Athletic, on March 7th, 52 days before Richardson was drafted with the Colts, the Athletic ran an article by Bruce Feldman, that said, they pulled NFL coaches anonymously at the combine. And the article said that, the coaches were intrigued by Richardson, but, he was, extremely raw were the words that they used. So this just wasn't a me thing. This was public intel where people in coaching circles even were having reservations about this. And, that didn't stop, Indianapolis. And I have great respect for their regime in that. And to me, it's a mystery. It really is a mystery because, everything I saw on tape with Richardson with the Florida Gators. I mean, I couldn't believe it. Even Jason, even like on Facebook leading up to the draft, when I put my, evaluation out there in the Florida Gators Nation, I had an normally when you put something that can be construed as negative, right, or something that's not, it's not, saying great things about a player, usually a fan base will bite back pretty hard on social media. But I was surprised because the Florida Nation, Gators Nation was basically about 50, 60% in agreement with me. And they're like, oh, no, he's not ready. Oh, no, he's too raw. Oh, no, this is a mistake. He should stay in school. Like, that's his own fan base saying these things, And so to me, it was a great mystery, and I had a pre-draft high injury alert on my scouting report on him, seeing him come in and getting hurt in 3 of his first 4 games, and of course, which ended with him having throwing shoulder surgery. The math was just too easy on this one, and just looking ahead, it's not a good picture, and for a few different reasons.
Yeah, something I've thought about, and I've heard you talk about this before. I'm not sure where, but I know I have on one of your videos. Timing from college to the NFL is a completely different ball game. So if Anthony Richardson has had very little time to get accustomed to it in college, but he never really got accustomed to it, like you would see, a guy coming to the NFL. If he comes to the NFL and he's trying to play and he's not even ready to like the college level, how is he going to manage with NFL timing? Like from you watching film, how different is that?
Well, that's a great question, Jason. I mean, the difference between the college and the NFL game is extreme. It's like going from college baseball using aluminum bats to going the Major League Baseball using a wooden bat, for example. I mean, even the size of the football is different from a regulation college football to an NFL football. It's a lot different. It's a lot different game. It's a lot faster. They hit a lot harder. It's a lot more complex. In college, you have the ability, it's a lot of vanilla type of passing coverage schemes, with a lot of guys who would never sniff an NFL locker room. It's something where, versus the NFL, you get these corners that have played 5, 10, 15 years, a little bit long in the tooth, that they know how to bait these quarterbacks. They'll win the fishing opener. Okay. That's how well they know to bait these guys. And not only that, but these defensive coaches in the NFL, like the Bill Belichick's of the world, these different types of coaches who have been sitting in a dark room for 30, 40, 50 years trying to come up with different schemes and all these things. And all of a sudden, a college quarterback who's raw to begin with. I mean, Anthony Richardson was a 53.8% completion percentage quarterback coming out of Florida. He's completing half of his passes, to your point, Jason, and in the college game as a lower level of competition, obviously, than the NFL. So now we go up a level of competition where the game is faster, more complex. They hit harder. I remember watching RG3 out of Baylor in his first game against Chicago in the preseason, and RG3 was one of those guys who liked to run a lot and manipulate defenses and try to get defenses to adjust to him with his wheels. And I know that first game, he ran, like at Baylor's no problem. He hit that edge and he just go. Well, in the first preseason game, he tried to hit the edge against the Chicago Bears, and I think it was Brian Roper, somebody, the Bear linebacker, came up and just bam, just just demolished him. I mean, in a preseason game, and you could see the look on RG3's face when the cameras panned in close. He was like, "Oh wow, okay, yeah, that's right. Everybody's fast here. I mean, everybody hits hard here. It's not just a couple guys. So it's a huge adjustment. And not only that, but to me, you see, when I put a 5th round grade on somebody, they say, you're hating. You're a player hater. I hear that all the time on Twitter and social media. I'm not player hating at all. I'm actually advocating for the player and trying to give him the best possible chance to succeed. Because realistically, unmet expectations are the source of human disappointment. So if we frame our expectations, I mean, this is not stuff I'm making up. This is stuff. I mean, you watch film. I mean, you can see it. You watch the film. Okay, this is what he does. It's not rocket scientist. This is what he does. Okay, now I'm going to start identifying patterns and tendencies of what he does, and those are. I'm not looking for the one-off, but the patterns and tendencies. And this is what he is in college. This is what the player's putting on film. This is not what Daniel Kelly's making up. This is what Anthony Richardson is doing on his college film. So to me, it's important that we take what he's showing us. Like my scouting mentor, Lionel Vitale, says, if somebody shows you who they are, believe them. Is what he says, and so this is what Anthony Richardson's showing us at a 53.8% completion percentage rate in college. He's showing us he's extremely raw. We got coaches at the combine telling this to us in The Athletic. Okay, we're seeing this now. It's our responsibility for those of us who evaluate in NFL draft media circles to take what he's showing and what he's saying and frame our expectations around that, and frame the general public's expectations more importantly around that, and frame teams' expectations around that too. Anything less is irresponsible journalism in my mind, because now instead of grading him as a 5th round pick, now we're saying he's a top 5 guy. Well, where I come from, a top 5 guy is a polished, pro-ready guy who steps in and signs autographs and can do it from day one. That's an elite franchise type of guy, a polished guy who's got his game down. Like we saw with C.J. Stroud this year. I mean, it's just a plug and play, boom. He just plug him in and away he goes. And when you take an Anthony Richardson and you thrust him and force him into this position of being something that he's not, it just creates these tremendous unrealistic expectations that he can never live up to. And had he been a 5th round pick, which had the expectations been framed properly by NFL draft media and so forth, he wouldn't have probably had that shoulder surgery. He wouldn't have been on the game. He would have been on the bench. He'd been learning behind Gardner Minshew. He would have that time to adjust. We see a Jordan Love who had a couple of years to kind of get the hang of things. We see some of these quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers had a couple of years behind Brett Favre. We see it is an adjustment period. It is an adjustment period because going from, I stood on the sidelines at the Jets, okay, and at the first mini camp, and I've been around football. I watched football my whole life. Being there in person on the sidelines and seeing how fast these guys are and how big they are and how hard they hit is astonishing, in person. And I'd like to be there. I mean, Neil O'Donnell was the quarterback at the time, one of the quarterbacks we had, and everybody said, "Oh, he's terrible. He's for the Steelers. He threw that interception in the Super Bowl." Neil O'Donnell, when I listened to the ball come off his hands, was like whistled. It was incredible. I mean, so it is a huge adjustment period, and it just wasn't fair what I think was done to Anthony Richardson, because just like Trey Lance and Zach Wilson and Kenny Pickett, these people we see that are in way over their heads, draft media for some reason feels the necessity to publicize these guys and hype these guys to the no ends. Caleb Williams, the same thing, and the expectations just get crazy. They get unrealistic, and now Anthony Richardson has to face that on a bum shoulder.
Yeah, it sucks. It sucks to see a young guy not ready, just being pushed out there while the media, everyone out there saying he's ready, he's going to be great, he's going to be awesome, just to find out that he's just another athlete trying to play quarterback, like you said earlier on. And unfortunately, the media, it's where they're just looking for clicks, just try to find this one player that we can get clicks out of, get a couple extra bucks out of. And unfortunately, it sways NFL fans and sports fans to the wrong way. And then, guys who are actually trying to tell the truth, really watching the film, everyone thinks that those, the very few people who do that are wrong. So how can you compare?
That's putting it nicely. They say other things too.
Yeah. We'll let those people have their wins. We don't care.
Absolutely.
It's not even worth it.
Absolutely.
So this is something I thought about a little bit to ask. a lot of people I've talked to who have looked at quarterbacks, and they've been pretty good track record. A lot of them, I guess, didn't think that Cam Newton would play pretty well enough. Like, I guess they thought he wouldn't translate. Is there any comparison of Anthony Richardson to Cam Newton in college? Or was he just so much more ready than AR was?
I didn't have a chance to evaluate Cam Newton coming out.
Okay.
My mentor did. He loved him. The thought process from what I've gathered was that people thought that he was more pro ready, I think, than what I kind of heard from the grapevine about Anthony Richardson, even from the Athletic article. And that it's just I try to listen to keep my ear to things, kind of see how people think. And yeah, I don't think there's any comparison between the two. It's Anthony Richardson was. I can't even emphasize or express how raw he looked on film. It was just, I mean, and granted, it's not just all negative. Okay, it's not just negative. I saw the things people loved. I saw the athletic ability. I saw the energy. I saw the good ball handling skills that he had in the pocket. I saw the raw big arm that hit the roof at the pro day. Of course, anybody could have done that, but that was for show. And I saw what I call behind the line of scrimmage mobility, where he was able to move around and stuff, and how he was better, throwing on the run, where he can manipulate defense and get them to react to him a little bit more than the other way around. And I saw all those type of things. That people loved about him, but it's really when you dial into the finer points of the quarterback position and how it translates. Because one of the things I do, Jason, when I watch an NFL quarterback with those NFL colored lenses you're talking about, that I always talk about, is I take when I'm watching college game film, I watch it differently than just I'm as I would as a fan. I watch this like I ask myself, this is what I'm watching right now on film. It has this. How is this translated to what I've seen in the NFL? Has this worked in the NFL? Have I seen this work in the NFL? Who does this guy remind me of in the NFL? And that's the thing. It's like, so when you start watching some of the finer detail, what do quarterbacks need to do in the NFL? Okay, well, just a few things. They need to be able to go through the progressions. So you see quarterbacks, you got it's not just a one read thing. You got to sit there and look at sometimes 2-3 reads, and you got to do it really quickly. I mean, the average time to throw according to next gen stats is anywhere between 2.3 seconds that would take Tua Tagovailoa down Miami, all the way up to 3.23 with Justin Fields, in that range. But 3 seconds is, I mean, you can't even heat up a meal in the microwave in 3 seconds. I mean, but it's that fast. You got to make decisions. And ball placement's huge. I'm not talking about completion percentage, but I'm talking about placement, putting the ball where it needs to be to give the receiver the optimum and ideal placement, so you can catch it and run yards after the catch, not have it way up here, or I got to dive for it way down here, or it's way behind me and I got to make some crazy circus adjustment. Ball placement's huge. Ball security is huge. Am I keeping the ball away from the opposition? And I don't just mean interceptions, but am I keeping the ball away from the opposition in terms of PBUs, pass breakups, that kind of thing too. And so when I watched Richardson on tape, even at Florida, I mean, it's not rocket science. It was just glaring. It was some of the easiest evaluating I've ever done. That's what confuses me about the decision, because his mechanics throwing the ball were poor. He was inconsistent throwing the ball on game film. I mean, I have the stuff on FirstRoundMock.com. You can go look at Anthony Richardson, pull up his evaluation. I'm the only draft site in America that offers the links to the games, the actual game footage. You can go click on the games and watch this stuff for yourself. It's not sealed behind some kind of a vault somewhere where you don't have access to it. This stuff is available to the general public to watch. You can watch it yourself. I mean, inconsistent at all 3 route levels at Florida: short, intermediate, and deep. He was a guy that he had an inconsistent release time. He was watching him play quarterback with the Florida Gators was like watching kids outside at recess playing a pickup game of football. And what do I mean by that? Well, he just stood there. He just stood there like a deer in headlights a lot of times. It's like he wouldn't throw the ball until somebody was open. That's not how it works in the NFL. His route tree was exposed. It was just, and there was this tremendous compulsion tendency to make ill-advised passes on game film. He was just, under pressure situations, game situations that were pressurized, pass rush situations. There was so much on his game film that I was just like, wow. I mean, this wasn't a hard one. This was easy. This to me was like, I was like, this is not translating. Everyone's saying that he's a top-rated prospect, and I'm out there being this one voice in a forest just screaming, don't do it. And it's not just, it's most of all for Anthony Richardson's sake. It's most of all for guys like, the Trey Lances of the world and the Zach Wilsons and the Kenny Pickett's that have absolutely positively no business being in the first round discussion based on what they've put on tape. And instead, let's put them in the round they belong in, so we can have our expectations framed properly. So when the guy comes into the game and does what he does from college to the NFL, and now he makes a good play in the NFL, now we're pleasantly surprised instead of grossly disappointed because our expectations are framed properly. Now there's not all this crazy pressure on these kids coming into the game and stuff. And I feel that's why a lot of them flame up pretty fast. I'm afraid that's going to happen to Anthony Richardson, and I personally hope it doesn't. I would rather take the L than see a young man's career go down the tubes, because to me, the saddest part about this story, I have one of my writers on my site that's done a lot of personal stories and backgrounds, Tori, who writes for firstroundmock.com, and she wrote some just beautiful pieces on just what type of a man Anthony Richardson is. It's just, he sounds like a super great human being. He sounds like a tremendous young man. He sounds like the type of guy that, I got some daughters that are in their 20s that, I wish they'd show up at the doors type. I mean, he sounds just like a great guy that you'd want to have around, a guy that's really a cool guy, a cool dude. And so it's sad because he didn't grade himself. He didn't draft himself. He didn't put himself in this position. Everybody else put these labels on him. Everybody else put these grades on him. Everybody else made these decisions for him. Now he finds himself in a situation trying to be something that he never was at Florida.
Yeah, it seems like that's pretty common nowadays. Just what you said. The media doesn't help putting these certain guys on a pedestal and then kind of leaving some other guys out. Like Brock Purdy, okay? So I'm going to be completely honest. When I was first watching tape on him, I was just brand new to tape, but I felt like I was watching a quarterback I felt like I was watching a quarterback that can be really good in the NFL. I didn't see any like crazy flashy stuff, but I saw him doing like the important things. And I thought he was maneuvering the pocket well, but then he kind of fell off. And no one was talking to him, and I'm like, I better sway back into the bushes so I don't, catch the heat. Because, but now now I'm better, and I understand. Just stick with what you believe in, and you know what? It's not tough for you guys to do. It's all you do is watch, and you've been doing it for a long time. So, oh my gosh, I just lost my train. That's something I have to work on so much, but yeah,
no, it's okay. It happens to me. It happens to me a lot. Hey, I got so many thousands of players in my head. I'll be talking about one thing. All of a sudden, I'll go off on some other path. I mean, it's common. But no, you're right. You're right, Jason. It's with Brock Purdy, you were spot on with what you were seeing. I mean, I wrote him up for SI Detroit Lions. My article's out there on him. To me, I liked him way better than Kenny Pickett or Sam Howell coming on the 2022 NFL draft. I comped him, in fact, to 2002 NFL MVP Rich Gannon pre-draft, but he wasn't flashy. You're right, he wasn't, but he was very efficient. And it's funny because watching it, when I know of Kyle Shanahan's system, and that's really the thing too, is different people out there say, well, picking quarterbacks is just a crapshoot. It's just a roll of the dice. You're just guessing. It's not just guessing. Maybe for some, but I've outlined on Twitter 33 different quarterback variables that I look for, and there's probably more than that there in the back of my head that I'm thinking of too. But that was just when I wrote that tweet. On X, and there's more variables probably that go into picking a franchise quarterback that's successful than picking the winning Powerball numbers. I mean, and then it's like not only do you have to, there's still some unknowns. because it's like we saw with Purdy. It's like, okay, so the unknowns are, you'll never know how a kid's going to perform with fame and fortune. You're never going to know that till it happens, and how that's going to affect him and his circle influences and friends and what what they're going to do, and who's all going to be pulling them to pay for what. You never know. You never know if he's going to stay healthy, like we see with Anthony Richardson. I mean, I thought it would be a high injury risk because he ran so much at Florida, and he ran, just the NFL's not kind to running quarterbacks. That was easy. And then the third thing too is that you're also going to not know the exact fit in the system he's going to as well, which I think Justin Fields has found out the hard way in Chicago is the fit. I mean, they keep trying. The last couple years, 3 years in Chicago, it's been watching Fields on film. It seems like watching someone trying to force a square peg into a round hole. Like you are going to be what we want you to. You are going to do this, and it's not who he is. I mean, Fields is a guy that excels, like Richardson, in a moving pocket, a guy that can get outside and he can use that running ability to make defenses honor that, to make them still feel like he may run, which kind of makes them more honest, and he's able to dictate more of the defense of the coverages when he's able to move around, as opposed to just sitting there like a traditional quarterback in the pocket. That's not who these people are. But so how does he do the system he fits in? And what we saw with Purdy was a great fit in San Francisco, because Kyle Shanahan's system is all about short to intermediate passes with the occasional deep pass mixed into it. And that's exactly what Brock Purdy was. And he was very efficient at doing it. And he was also great at protecting the ball at Iowa State. And he looked like he had a very high football IQ. It was a slam dunk. To me, I mean, I put a YouTube video out when Trey Lance was drafted saying that Brock Purdy was going to beat him out in training camp, because I knew for a fact, after I watched Lance at North Dakota State University and I watched Brock Purdy at Iowa State, I already done the math in my mind. I said, there's no possible way Trey Lance is going to beat this guy out in Kyle Shanahan's system, because this guy fits what they're doing. And that's what a lot of this comes down to, as far as fit into a system as well.
Yeah, I learned a very valuable lesson from that, and to stick with what I believe in, not going to let other people sway that anymore. I'm not,
you have to.
And I think a big reason why I kind of let my opinion change was because I was new into tape. So I'm like, am I seeing the right things? Am I, so I guess that was another reason why I changed and like kind of swayed in the bushes. But when I saw him playing well, I'm like, dang it, I should have stuck my guns.
Hey, don't be too hard on yourself, Jason. I'm the guy in my 1998 draft book that got me hired at the Jets. I'm the guy that had Ryan Leaf rated number 1 and Peyton Manning ranked number 4. So we all been there.
Oh boy! If Colts fans didn't not like you already.
No. I know. And I had what was it? Brian Greasy rated number 2, and some guy named Dan Gonzalez rated number 3 ahead of Peyton Manning. So, I mean, hey, it happens to all of us, and it's a live and learn process. Evaluation, you get in there, you start, there's no secret to it. You grind the film, you do it, you keep doing it. You get some right, you get some wrong, you learn from why you were wrong. Like I just put a tweet out today about my 2014 take on Tim Tebow, saying that he was going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback. I've learned from that. I learned a lot. I expressed all the things I learned from that experience. The importance of the structure that's built around the quarterback and the support system that's put in place for him, that either plays or doesn't play to his strengths, and the play scripting. Are we calling plays that fit who he is, or are we calling plays that we want him to be something he's not? Are we all these kind of things go into this, what I've learned from that process. And I also learned too, and I kind of knew this during my time in the NFL, but I've also seen it to be really true, like in the case of a Tim Tebow or somebody, is that the further removed that these quarterbacks get from the person who drafted them, the harder it becomes on them, because it's just not their guy. And, we see that now with Trey Lance down in Dallas. He wasn't drafted by those people. It's going to be that much harder for him to get on the field now than, after San Francisco gave up on him. So, so those are some of the things that look at.
All right. So before I move forward, I do want to ask, do you have a certain time you have to be out of here at? I should have asked you this before, but do you have a certain time? Is there,
No, not tonight, not tonight. And my
Okay.
wife will say thank you to you for keeping me on here and talking about football. She's like, can you please find somebody else to talk about with this stuff other than me? She's,
Hey.
God bless her. I mean, she'll sit. We'll be out at a fancy dinner, and I'll say something, and she goes, "You're thinking about him, aren't you?" And I'll be like, well, who? And she's like, she's Caleb Williams. You're thinking about him again, aren't you? I was just on a show like earlier that day. I'm like, yeah. She goes, okay, what do you need to talk about? And I'm like, it's like, she goes, so anytime I have an opportunity to be on a show like this, and she loves it. She's like, absolutely stay on there, get it all out. It still doesn't get all out, but no, I'm good. Thank you for
Hey,
asking.
so all right, yep, of course. So if you ever see me going live in the future, just say, hey, you want to come on? I don't mind having you on. I don't
Cool.
mind at
Thank
all. Or
you.
if you want me
Thank
to come
you.
on yours, likewise.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
so before we get into into your bread and butter with all the draft stuff, even though we already have, I want to ask you how what is your process in taking notes? Because I've tried reading them; they're a little tough, not gonna lie, but you understand them, and that's what matters most. So, can you kind of walk me through a process of one play? It doesn't have to be this crazy and detailed thing, but just say one play of a quarterback, or just briefly. How do you write notes?
Like hieroglyphics. I mean, it's I can't even read my own writing. I have on my Instagram. You go look at. I have all the examples of my notes because
Yep.
I believe very strongly in accountability. It looks like it's like here's a picture of my brain type of thing. People are like, holy smokes, that's what's going on inside there. I'm like, yeah, that's a snapshot. But how I take notes, it's very it's my system. Every scout has their own system, and this that works for them. And for me, it's analyzing each and every single play that a player makes. And like for example, with a quarterback, I'm watching everything. I'm watching I'm watching how he comes up, how he's in the huddle, how he comes up to the line of scrimmage, the rhythm and tempo in which he leads the offense with. Quarterbacks to me are like, I've expressed on a lot of shows, are like a drummer in a band. You need a quarterback that has consistent timing and rhythm on every single play. Why? Because, the entire team, the other 10 guys are relying on timing. Receivers rely on timing. Offensive linemen rely on timing. Otherwise, they're a legal man downfield or something. Everybody relies on timing. So I'm looking at every single thing. Back old school, I used to listen to the cadences of the quarterbacks, and I would discern for the confidence in their voices when they yelled out, yellow 30 or 59 black razor like Montana or whoever it was. And, but I watch everything and I watch how he takes the snap. I watch, as he's going through his, whether it's shotgun, is he always in the gun or is he under center? Can he take snaps under center? Is he how does he take the snap? I'm watching the footwork. Footwork is paramount. The feet. Everything happens with the feet with a quarterback. Everything happens there. Focus on the feet, because what happens is that the NFL is built on timing routes, and this is where quarterbacks like a Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, these type of quarterbacks are going to have just a whale of a hard time in the NFL, because if you watch their footwork in the pocket in college, it looks like they're tap dancing. There's no rhythm. They're all over the place with this stuff. But you're looking at the feet, and is it a 3, 5, 7 steps drop? Of course, since Patrick Mahomes, a lot of the stuff's gone out the windows. Everybody trying to be like him and trying to just wing it, and all the off-platform throws and all the cool, neat things that we talk about these days. But I'm watching the footwork. I'm watching the ball handling. Is the play action, if he's going to run a play action fake, is it actually convincing, or is he just going through the motions? That's a big one. In other words, does it fool anybody? I mean, that's what it was designed to do in the first place, is I'm going to put the ball in the running back's belly and make the defense think that he has it. It's not just a wasted motion. I mean, that just takes time. Why are you doing that if you're not trying to actually fool a defense? So I'm watching the ball handling. I'm watching the drop back. I'm watching the head. Is he moving his head around? Can I see on tape? Is he moving his head around? Is he going through his progressions? And of course, I'm writing this stuff down, to your point, Jason. I'm stopping the tape, the film. I hit pause pause. I write this down. Okay, footwork does this. He drops back. Ball placement. The ball handling does. I'm right. I'm chicken scratching on the side. I'm doing all this stuff. My notes just so crazy because I'm processing this in every play. And then is he going through his progressions? Do I see his head moving around? Is he reading defenses, or is he just a one lock guy like Shedeur Sanders and just lock in and go? So I'm looking at that. And then of course when it comes time to throw, I'm watching. Like his arm strength. I'm watching things like his release. I'm watching the arm angle. I'm watching the, all those kinds of things. Ball placement, like we talked about. Is the ball right here? Are we putting it right there where it needs to be, or do I have to get Randy Moss and come out of retirement to make him get him up in the air and go Moss at somebody, and so all that kind of stuff I'm watching. I'm watching other things too. I'm watching. I take a lot of heat. I just wrote a big post yesterday, in fact, about I'm a big TV film guy. I don't like the all 22 as much. I like the televised games because the televised games, to me, of course, that's the way I came up probably, so that's why I like it. But I've watched all 22. I watched all 22 at the Jets. I've watched it, the right articles for different major publications. But I prefer the game film because the game film shows you angles of things that all 22 doesn't. It gets close up to the quarterback's face. Does he look? How's he look? What's his body language look like? I paid close attention to that. Write it down. Shoulders seem slumped. He looks sad. He looks this. He looks that. He looks confident. What's he looking like? How do his teammates respond to him? That's another big one. He gets knocked down and sacked. Are we getting the offensive lineman to go back there and help him up? Are we getting offensive linemen out there want to get a fight for this guy and hey, push you and get pushed back? Are we watching guys who want to defend this guy and fight for this guy? Or are we just watching a guy? Hey, just sit there, buddy. What are we watching? How is he on the sidelines? Is he sitting off by himself and nobody really wants to associate with him? Or is he a guy where everybody's joking around, clowning around with him and having fun with him? Is he a team leader? All these type of things on every single play. And there's a lot more to it. This is just off the top of my head that, to answer your question, I'm watching for and I'm writing notes and just, I start out with a white sheet of paper and it turns out to be almost a blue sheet of paper with pen afterwards. And it's just what I'm looking for again. And this is the key to scouting. It's you're not looking for the one-off. You're looking to identify patterns and tendencies. You're looking to see what he does consistently to be able to project him as a quarterback, whether you're looking college or pro quarterbacks. You're looking for tendencies and patterns. And that's what the notes really do, because really it's like, the notes are like I don't know if you ever used one of those jigsaw puzzles as a kid. Those great big jigsaw puzzles.
Yeah.
It might have been 50,000, 5,000 piece or whatever. These are like 50, 75,000 piece jigsaw puzzles that somebody that just throws over the floor. And all these are different notes are a piece to his puzzle. Every piece of information, every play, every documented thing that happens in the press, every quote, every press conference, everything is a piece of information. And the job of a scout is to piece all these things together and come up with a big picture perspective. And then in the back of your mind, you're remembering at all times, does this work in the NFL? Have I seen this succeed in the NFL? What is this going to work in the NFL? And that's how you make that projection into the NFL, into that bridge with those NFL color lenses. You make that bridge, that transition, and say, okay, I can see a guy like Spencer Rattler doing really well in the NFL. I can see a guy like a Michael Penix doing really well in the NFL because he fits. I can see a guy like Bo Nix. Bo Nix is a guy that is perfect for today's NFL offenses. So they script all these plays in the short to intermediate range. The guy, that is who Bo Nix is. Bo Nix, if Kirk Cousins had a little brother named Bo Nix, that would be him. I mean, it's just, he fits that. He's got good mobility. He can move around. He can throw short to intermediate. That's the NFL game. A guy like Kyle Shanahan would absolutely positively love a guy like Bo Nix. He fits kind of that Brock Purdy kind of, that mold. I'm not saying he's going to be Brock Purdy, but he's a plug and play pro ready quarterback because he's run it. He's done it for so long in college. So those are the things that I'm looking for in every single play in the notes and writing down, and then just taking those notes and just making the overall big picture and the projection based on the notes.
Right. Thank you for going so much into detail. I truly appreciate just listening to you. I'm learning a lot from you. Truly am. So many things you're saying I never would think just to listen to the quarterback's voice, and kind of determine how confident he is there, and just all those little things, like, are the offensive linemen going to help him up? Little things I never would think about, but that's what happens when you're so passionate about something. You work your absolute butt off, and that's what happens. And I see it, So
That's
Spencer
cool.
Rattler is another player I see that you're very, very, very high on.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the same situation with the Brock Purdy for me with Spencer Rattler. Like, I was talking about him when he was at Oklahoma. Like, I was comparing him to Sam Howell because I think those two were like the top two guys at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of going, you know what? I think Sam Howell has some good traits, but I think Spencer Rattler has a higher ceiling because even though Spencer Rattler, like, it feels like his game can kind of be all over the place sometimes. It feels like he has some kind of a big play factor to him. Like, I'm not saying he is Mahomes, but I'm saying he has some kind of big play factor to him like Mahomes. Now, I can't go into detail, but what do you think? I mean, I know you like Spencer Rattler, and I know you think
Right.
I think you said that you think he's your best quarterback coming out this year. He's definitely up
Yes.
there.
Yeah, he's my QB1.
So,
Yep.
so can you go into that a little bit more for us?
Yeah, absolutely. You're seeing it right as far as who Spencer Rattler is. I mean, I'll start by saying that, but this is a guy that he's a tougher evaluation. He really is. Now, I've watched 29 games of Spencer Rattler dating back to his days at Oklahoma. He's a guy that he's the things I love about Spencer Rattler is what I really see in his eyes. He's got this burning passion, for the game. He's got a burning desire to be the best. It's funny you say the Patrick Mahomes thing, because I actually wrote an article a couple of years ago comparing him to Patrick Mahomes, and I think he's the closest thing. I won't go quite that far with it officially, but I will say this: he's the closest thing to a Patrick Mahomes in this draft class. He's got that mobility. He's able to move around. He's very calm, cool, and collected. He's a guy that has a tremendous chip on his shoulder. He's a guy that, what happened at Oklahoma, is a guy that's misunderstood what happened with the Netflix thing. I mean, he was a kid back then. It's all these things that people talk about. And one of the most impressive things I see about a Spencer Rattler is where a lot of these guys are out there running their mouth and saying this, that, and the other. Didn't hardly hear a word. If I did hear a word when he was benched at Oklahoma, that's pretty uncommon. I mean, this guy was on his way. People talked about Spencer Rattler being the number one pick back in the day. And Spencer Rattler, at the time he was benched, he was 5-0 with like a 79.6% completion percentage or some ridiculous amount, at Oklahoma. He had been 88% completion percentage a week before he was benched in the Texas game. He was 88% completion percentage against Kansas State or Kansas. I forget which one it was. But he was a guy that, he was on the track to becoming probably the Heisman Trophy winner if he would continue to play that season. And he was benched, and all of a sudden it's the Caleb Williams show. And, a lot of young men would have been like, forget this, give me a microphone. Let me tell you what I really think of this. But he never did that. Instead, he just worked. And that's key. He went to that's something Belichick talked about all those years in New England. Know your role, do your job. And that's Spencer Rattler. He went to South Carolina. And, when Caleb was getting all the press and doing all the cool things, he was over in South Carolina with a team, that wasn't nearly as talented from a rank standpoint. And, but yet he played his butt off. He worked hard. And this last season was miraculous what he did. It wasn't just good. It was downright miraculous. I mean, this guy had one healthy wide receiver who I love, Xavier Legette. His number 2 receiver was Juice Wells, who's been gone since the second week of the season. His number 2 and 3 receiver on his team were tight ends. He had 9 different, I think as of November 4th, he had 9 different offensive line combinations he had played with. He had no continuity offensive line. He had the number 128th out of 132 ranked running attack in college football at South Carolina. He played on like the number, I forget, I think it was like number 72 ranked team in the country or something. He just had very little supporting cast around him and talent around him, but yet he had a higher higher completion percentage than Caleb Williams did this last season, with hardly anything to work with. And he took a beating, but he just kept getting up. He kept firing. Spencer Rattler is a guy who really reminds me of Brett Favre. He's got that just, hit me in the mouth. I'm going to come back. I'm going to fire a touchdown the next play. Hit me harder. I'm going to beat you. Okay. He's one of these guys that's like he's got a mentality of a heavyweight champion boxer. He's a guy that you may hit him, you may get him, you may even knock him down, but he's coming back. And I love that about him. This is a guy that I've just have loved since the first time I laid eyes on him in Oklahoma. And I've been consistent about it the entire time. I've read, all these different reports on him throughout the years and dating back to his 2020 game film. And he's a guy that's he's a fighter. He's a competitor. He's a guy that's mobile. He's athletic. He can make plays. People say, aren't you concerned that he's a little too short? No, I'm not concerned at all, because the thing Spencer Rattler can do is he's got those instincts, kind of like, the Mahomes instincts, where he feels pressure in the pocket and he can slide up and he can move around and he can find throwing lanes and he can see things. It wasn't a problem at South Carolina. He wasn't getting the ball batted down all the time. Those guys are just as big about, he was playing in South Carolina as they are in the NFL. It's not some kind of, they don't just become 8 feet tall or something in the NFL. Rattler is just a guy that, just from, they say in the game, the game is won or lost from the neck up, and Spencer Rattler has it going on from the neck up. And the thing about it that's kind of cool about it is just kind of seeing the process. The media has ignored him. I mean, the NFL Network wouldn't even say his name hardly. During the workouts, I noticed that. And of course, when they did mention that, they brought up the Netflix thing. Come on. He went into the Senior Bowl. He was a Senior Bowl MVP. His reaction and response was, "What are you going to do now?" And he said, "I'm paraphrasing. He said, I'm going to keep working." Great answer as far as I'm concerned, with my background. And then he goes to the combine. He throws the ball as well as anybody there. He's got Caleb Williams literally, I posted a tweet, literally dancing around him. Caleb Williams, who didn't participate in the event at the combine, is literally dancing around him as he's trying to work out. It was just wild. It's just like, it's I can't go into detail how wild that was. But he kept his composure, and then of course he goes to his pro day, has a real nice pro day down in South Carolina recently. And this is a guy. I mean, you talk about adversity, and that's really, when you talk about a top 10 team that's drafting in the first round, top 10 teams are in the top 10 because they had the worst records in the league last year, right? So a guy like, to me, you want a quarterback who has mastery over adversity. You want somebody who has proven they can weather the storms. Spencer Rattler has unequivocally proven throughout the course of his college career that he can overcome adversity. First with the benching at Oklahoma, then he gets sent away. He's got to watch Caleb Williams over here and do all these cool things. He's over South Carolina. He's got the whole team falling apart. Everything that's happening. He had a lot more adversity to deal with than Caleb Williams did. Caleb Williams was quoted in the LA Times last November, saying that, he's never been 7-5 before in his life. And he's just, I'm paraphrasing, you can look it up. He says, I'm just kind of basically essentially learning to deal with adversity. I've never really been through this. I'm leaning on Lincoln Riley. I'm talking to friends and family members. I'm trying to learn how to kind of navigate through this. It's been a tremendous learning experience for me. That is really scary. When you're listening to a quarterback talking about he's just learning to cut his teeth on adversity. And now you're going to put him into a situation where that's all it is. Versus a guy like a Spencer Rattler, who has cut his teeth on adversity. He's a guy that not only has cut his teeth on it, but he's said very, very little. That's key. Is the guys who have every right to say something, but they don't really say much or anything at all. They just play, and they allow their play to do their talking for them. Very, very mature. Spencer Rattler has a very good head on his shoulders. And that's going to be paramount. And when a team looks for, a team that's going through adversity, this is exactly the guy. I mean, if you put an offensive line in front of Spencer Rattler, and I wrote about this in my evaluation, you put a running game behind him, it's going to be frightening what this guy can do in the National Football League because of who he is and all the different abilities and talents that he has to go with it. But really, it's who he is from the neck up is really what makes him so good. The same reason is why Michael Penix Jr. is my QB2 headed into this thing. Talk about a guy who's been through adversity. University. This guy had 4 straight seasons at Indiana of season-ending injuries. I mean, there was an article written where he was on the floor crying just because he didn't even know he could go on anymore, but he found the strength to do it. And then he bounces back to Washington and puts together 2 nice seasons. 2023 was by far and away the best season he had. I had a 5th-round grade on his 2022 film. I elevated him to a 1st-round grade. I couldn't even believe I was doing it myself when I did it. But now I've gone from his biggest critic. I had an undraftable free agent grade on Penix at Indiana, and now he's my QB2 with a top 10 grade because he has proven he can overcome adversity. Now I'm his biggest fan. And it's guys like this who as teams that are struggling, this is the type of guy who can lead you out of the storm.
Yeah. Oh, I thought I was unmuted. But yeah, I see a guy like Caleb Williams, and sometimes when he talks, it just kind of feels like he thinks he's already there. He thinks he's already winning. Like he thinks he's already has done what he has needed to do. But like you said, Spencer Rattler, he is always coming back. He keeps his mouth shut. He fights. And I feel like that is very important when you come to the NFL because if you're not serious, and I don't know, all those other players in there, everything they went through, all the adversity they went through, they're not going to take that guy seriously, I don't think. So when they see a guy like Spencer Rattler's, come in and, be demanding it, in a good way, everything he's been through, all the adversity, and having a quarterback, having that second leader other than the head coach go through all that, I feel like that elevates the entire team and makes the team want to run through a wall for him. So it just makes a team better. It makes the locker room better. It makes everything just so much, it just runs so much better. So anything else you want to say on that before we move on?
No, I think we covered it all. Thank you for asking.
Absolutely. So the next debate I want to talk about, you always hear people saying you should draft for needs. You should draft for best player available. What is your take when a team comes onto a situation like that? Should they draft the best player available or should they draft for the need? Is it very situational? I'm sure it is, but your take on that?
Yeah, there's both philosophies, and they've been around since I can remember. It's and throughout time, just this season, in fact, this draft cycle, this draft season, I'm starting to see it differently. I'm starting to see choice C, and what choice C is, it is situational. To me, I think it's very wise to look at how the game is trending. And look at the trends and kind of like think, okay, what's happening right now in the league? What's happening right now in the league is that 32 out of 32 teams are passing the football more than 50% of the time, according to teamrankings.com. Okay, there's 7 teams that are passing more than 60% of the time, including the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. Okay, so what does that tell me? Okay, for me, when I set a 1st-round value board, and when I'll be setting mine coming up here at the beginning of April, I'm looking at, this is how I have the positions ranked. Number 1 is quarterback. Everything starts with the quarterback. In today's quarterback-driven league. Okay, the second most important thing to me is the wide receiver and elite tight ends. Because the quarterback needs to be able to complete the ball. I mean, if he's just throwing it to nobody, who's going to catch anything? I mean, he may be good, but he's got to, it's got to be a receiver on the other side of that thing. Okay. The third most important thing is it's all about passing the ball in today's game and stopping the pass. So what's the third most important thing to me is edge rushers. The guys, if I'm trying to stop the other quarterback, I need a guy like a Liatu Latu or a Jared Verse, or a Braylon Trice are my top 3 pass rushers heading into this draft cycle. I need a guy that can, those guys, those fire breathing, demons off the edge. Those guys that just like, woo, okay, yeah, that's what I need in my third most position, important position. Number 4, cornerback, very, very important. I need guys that can cover receivers. And this is the way I would rate them on the draft board to answer your question. 5, offensive tackles. I got to have bodyguards out there. I need to form a pocket. I need to keep my quarterback off the ground and keep the equipment guy happy without having to scrub stains off his jersey too much. Offensive tackles are huge. 6, defensive tackles. I love defensive tackles. A Kalijah Cansey last year, guys that can, they can wreak havoc coming up the middle. A Jalen Carter, a guy like that. These guys, they just, because the worst athletes on the offensive line are the interior, are the offensive guards and the center. center. That's why they're not playing tackle, because they don't have the feet for it, but they can block. So you can press those gaps. You can put those boys on skates. You can drive them right back in the quarterback. And I love those defensive tackles. Number 7, center. You got to have a great center. You got to have a guy that can call to signals, and like we saw with Jeff Saturday all those years with the Colts, and a guy that kind of your go-to, your anchor of your offensive line, if you will. 8 offensive guards is my 8th most important priority position. Number 9, running back. Not as important as it was when I was growing up, when 3 yards and cloud of dust was all about. But it's not as much about running back anymore. But running backs are still important. Number 10, safeties, last line of defense. Number 11, linebackers. I'm not talking about edge rushers, but rather just linebackers. Like Mike linebackers or cover backers. Number 12, I'd like to have an elite return specialist, a guy that can really wreak havoc. He's a punt return guy. And then 13 would be a field goal kicker. Obviously, a field goal kicker goes to number 1 on the list if the game's on the line. And as we saw with the throughout the years with all the different Colts games, it's obviously very important to have a great kicker. And those guys bounce around quite a bit. But those are kind of the way I prioritize the top 13 needs when I'm looking at a draft board. So if I'm sitting there as a scout, or someday hopefully as a general manager of a team, and I'm looking at kind of like, that's where I'm at right now, is really just kind of centering things around where the game is at and where the game is trending, and kind of building around that, because to me that's what baffled me last year about what the Detroit Lions did when they took that linebacker, that Mike linebacker in the first round, the middle linebacker, was it Campbell from Iowa. It's like, okay, this guy can't get to the quarterback, okay, and this isn't 1980s Chris Spielman football anymore, where you need that middle linebacker that's going to plug the middle, like a Matt Millen, or one of those guys back in the day that I loved. It doesn't make sense in today's game. It doesn't make sense to take a guy that high, because the game again is about passing the ball and stopping the pass. So to me, those are the priorities heading into the draft.
All right. So sounds good to me. So we do have a question from someone in the comments. Gonna give them a shot. I appreciate you being here, so I'm gonna throw the question out there. And of course,
thank
your
you.
Redskins fans from Miller BZ. He asked, "Who should the Redskins draft? Who do you think Redskins should be looking into? Anyone on the top of the list that you're really looking into?"
Spencer Rattler.
There you go.
Absolutely. Spencer Rattler. I mean, that's it. All starts with building around the quarterback, and that's the guy. I mean, that's if I'm a general manager in Washington right now, it was my job. I mean, I would personally run the card up to the commissioner.
All right. So the next topic is, the Colts draft strategy. As we know, Chris Ballard is a guy, he loves to build in the draft. And a lot of people right now are after his throat a little bit because he's not going out and signing people. But I feel like he did a very good job re-signing his guys. I think that's very important. But some draft needs, I feel like cornerback, wide receiver, tight end. What other positions, do you think the Colts really should look into? Of course, quarterback. But other than quarterback, what are some positions, some specific guys at cornerback, wide receiver, tight end? Maybe another position that you have that the Colts should look into and they should seriously consider drafting.
Well, I think that, obviously, from what I've said in this show, that they should be looking at quarterback in the first round. I know that's a very unpopular opinion, but I think now that, losing Gardner Minshew was huge. I think that's way underestimated in the media. So what he meant to that organization. I know they signed Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco's, he's comeback player of the year. I love him, respect him. But Joe Flacco. Yeah, Joe Flacco's a guy where, he's like one of those classic cars you have that it looks great. It runs, everybody loves it. Everybody, oh, wow, look at that. It's like having a 1959 Cadillac or something, and it wins all these awards at car shows. But, you may be sitting in traffic somewhere and it may just be done. And that's what's going to happen. He's going to be done at any moment. So to me, quarterback is very, very important for the Colts to draft first round. I don't think they can possibly bet on Anthony Richardson going forward. I don't think this coaching staff or this GM can really afford to bet on Anthony Richardson. I mean, this guy is more fragile than my dinner plates. It's it's he's a guy that it's it's going to be really tough to me. With that said, now probably if the Colts probably won't do that because they're trying to build around Richardson, and I get that from they're trying to what they're trying to do there. But definitely drafting a quarterback in the later rounds. A guy like a Rocky Lombardi is a guy that one of my writers is really high on from NIU. A guy like that, or a guy like a Devin Leary. A guy like just bringing somebody along those lines. I would even say if the Colts can get their hands on Jordan Travis in the third or fourth round, let him sit for a year the way the Detroit Lions did with Hendon Hooker last year, and let him continue to recover and heal and just kind of learn the process. And hey, I had a higher grade on Jordan Travis than I did Caleb Williams last year. Even when I had Caleb as second round grade, I graded his 2022 film with a second round grade. I had Travis's film in 2022 graded. Again, I evaluate every snap of Travis too. I had him with a first round grade, so he would be worth a third or fourth round pick for sure. As a guy that because what you want to do too with quarterback is you want to bring somebody in that kind of fits what Anthony Richardson is. You kind of want to bring in that dual role guy so the offense doesn't have this major. I mean, Joe Flacco couldn't move if the building was on fire, in the pocket. I mean, that doesn't fit their offense even. That's what's surprising about that is because the offense is geared. You want the backup to be kind of, in my opinion, be kind of geared towards what you're doing offensively and what players are used to and what kind of things they're used to. An offensive lineman, okay, that's just me, but. So a quarterback in the later rounds would be important. Besides that, I mean, I looked at before our show. I looked at NFL.com. I do lean on them heavily because I know they have their ears to the walls of the teams. Obviously, they're tapped in. They work for the league website. Obviously, they have sources. NFL.com says Colts needs are defensive tackle, wide receiver, cornerback, and edge and safety. Are the positions they got ranked for the Colts on, I think it was February 11th. They put that out there in NFL.com. The Colts pick at number 15. To me, if I walked in there and Mr. Irsay said, okay, Daniel, I don't really care what you think about Anthony Richardson. He's our quarterback. Deal with it. And I'd be like, okay, sir, no problem. So what I would do is I would find a way. I would look at what Anthony Richardson does well on game film, okay, and it's just like what the Bears need to do with Fields. I would look at what Richardson does well in film, and I would build around that. I would try to build an infrastructure, a support system around him from a personnel standpoint around Anthony Richardson. What he does well. What does he do well in film? Okay, well, besides running, I don't want him running. I definitely don't because he's proven he can't hold up that well. But what does he do well? He throws short passes well. He does do that, So I want to bring in wide receivers. I want to bring in a tight end. Like if the Colts could find a way to trade for Brock Bowers out of Georgia, would be absolutely amazing to this offense. So Brock Bowers, I have a Hall of Fame grade on Brock Bowers. It's only the second time in my life I've put a pre-draft Hall of Fame grade on a player. Last year was the first time with Jalen Carter coming out of Georgia. Brock Bowers is just an absolute defensive wrecker. I mean, he wrecks secondaries. The things that he does is just wild to watch him running routes and the tenacity he plays with. And I mean, he's the same guy, the first snap of the game and the last snap of the game, same guy. Doesn't matter if they're up by 35 or down by 7, same guy, same effort level, I don't think I've ever seen quite that before in my life. Brock Bowers is just super impressive, and he runs routes. I mean, because and this would be a great safety valve for an Anthony Richardson too, because Bowers would be a guy because he creates mismatches. When I worked at the Jets, I learned so much about mismatches. From Charlie Weiss, who was a master at the offensive coordinator of the Jets at the time, learned a lot about from Joe Gibbs, who I studied as a kid. Mismatches, a huge thing to look at. And Bowers creates an offensive mismatch because he's matching up against linebackers and safeties that are nowhere near as athletic as he is. So when Bowers has his signature move. The greats have these little signature things they do, whether it's a pass rusher, whether it's a receiver, whether it's whatever. Bowers does this thing where he comes down and he runs routes hard. I mean, and he's a guy that can kind of line up in line. He can flank out. He can go in the slot. He can go out wide. He's a guy you always have to be aware of. Where's Brock Bowers? See if he can take a handoff. I've seen him do that on film too. He's always a guy you consciously, as the defensive coordinator, where's Brock Bowers? That you always got to be thinking about this because he drives hard off the line of scrimmage. It's set up, the ball snap. He drives hard into that route, and he comes into that route. So he's coming down. He's coming down on the defense really hard, and he does this thing. He does this thing right where he does this like this little move, like this little signature move. He does this, there's like this juke move he does, and by the time that the stiffer, less agile linebacker or safety figures out which way this is going, it creates that throwing window, and the defender can't respond that fast. He either guesses right or he guesses wrong. If he guesses wrong, Brock Bowers is still running and we're still doing the show. Otherwise, if he guesses right, maybe he makes the tackle. Brock Bowers is great at yards after the catch. Brock Bowers would be an ideal pick if there's any. I know everybody in Indianapolis Colts fandom is please bring in Marvin Harrison Jr. It's a great storyline. I love his dad. I liked watching him. The storyline would be incredible, but really and truly, if there's a player that the Colts were thinking about moving up for, it would be Brock Bowers, a tight end out of Georgia. Outside of that, you want to look at receivers. You want to build that support structure around Richardson. You want to look at receivers like a Ladd McConkey out of Georgia, who's great safety valve player, a guy that can make all these, he's like lightning in a bottle at receiver. He's a guy that, will be great for an Anthony Richardson. A guy like a Malachi Corley, would be great too. A guy that specializes in yards after the catch, a guy that can take those little screen passes, little bubble routes, receiver bubble routes, and he can just take it and run. He's built like his legs look like a running back. I mean, and cornerbacks in the NFL are not good tacklers. They just are not. I watch him week after week doing like write-ups for Yardbarker, and I do NFL quarterbacks for them. And cornerbacks are awful tacklers in the NFL for the most part. So you got this guy with these big, huge, round, legs are built like tree trunks, catching the ball and running straight at guys. It's going to be a mismatch. So guys like that, a guy like a Jalen Polk, who I love, who I comp to Andre Rison, the old receiver in the league. Polk plays, of course, out with Washington with the Huskies. Played with Penix. He excels at all three route levels. But those are the type of guys. Then, of course, from rounds 3 to 7 and undrafted guys, you can never bring in enough offensive linemen, obviously, and plug those guys in. And here's the thing that baffles me about the Colts is that I am really, truly surprised that the Colts did not try to go and bring in Saquon Barkley or a Derrick Henry because Anthony Richardson so desperately needs somebody like that in the backfield. Now, yes, Jonathan Taylor's there, but he's coming off his lowest yardage output of his career last year, 10 games played, 741 yards rushing, 7 touchdowns. Is he on the decline? Time will tell. Certainly looks like it from a statistical standpoint as far as analyzing it. But that's so important to Anthony Richardson. It takes so much pressure off of him. It takes pressure off any quarterback. I mean, without it, look what happened in Dallas this year. With Pollard. Pollard's not a true number 1 running back. He's a backup. He's a number 2. They tried to make him number 1. Look at the pressure and stress that put on Dak Prescott. Everybody knew he was going to throw the ball. Defenses played it that way. They played for the pass, and look what happened. It was easy as 2+2. And that's why these guys need these type of players. So getting a running back is paramount too. I think the draft a running back in the 2nd or 3rd round, a guy that can come in and at least challenge, at least be there in case something happens to Taylor. A guy like maybe a Trey Benson on a Florida State. There are no elite running backs in this draft. There aren't any. There aren't any 1st round talents that I've seen so far. But a guy like Trey Benson's a very hard runner. A guy like a Bucky Irving out of Oregon is a fast little runner that that can do some exciting stuff, especially on turf, probably, and the surface that the Colts play on stuff. So, they need to get a running back in there too, because if they don't have a viable running back with Anthony Richardson back there, it's just going to put, again, that much more pressure on him to have to do everything. And we see how that ended last season.
Yeah, we sure did. We sure did. Going around doing things that he shouldn't be doing. So on to the Brock Bowers thing now. I know I told you about this in the outline. When you said number 2 for tight end, it shocked me a little bit, to be honest, because I've always looked at tight end as a position that just isn't worth taking in the first round. But you kind of opened my eyes a little bit. When the tight end is worth taking in the first round, it is really worth it. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Yes. The tight end is, there's only a few of them. I had a first round grade on Kyle Pitts too coming out. There's only a few of them that you would go get. Tight end is kind of like it's kind of a dinosaur position. It's kind of a dying breed. You got a few good ones, and the teams that have the good ones, they're pretty good.
Yeah,
we just saw two. We saw 2 teams in the Super Bowl who happened to coincidentally have great tight ends. So if you're looking at trends in the league, that says they might be important. A guy, he has to be special. And Brock Bowers, like I said, I put a Hall of Fame grade on him. I've done 15 games of study on him. I've put all the links on my reports and stuff so people can go watch and stuff. But one word really came to mind, and I've watched more tape than I've watched more football games than probably who knows how much I've watched throughout the years. I can't even put an analogy to it. Siskel and Ebert have watched movies. But the one word that comes to mind when I watch Brock Bowers is wow. If I was sitting in a draft room at the Colts and I was a scout on the Colts, and they called on me and said, "Daniel, it's your turn to talk. What do you think about Brock Bowers?" I would start my presentation with wow.
On the table.
On the table, and pound the table. I mean, he's a complete tight end. He's a guy that blocks just as well as he catches, which is very rare for a star tight end. Most guys, they don't really care about blocking. They just want the glory and the touchdown catches and the passes. And this guy is a high level blocker. He gets after it. He really blocks like he cares, and he runs routes like I pointed out. The 3 things that are most impressive, and this is what I'd point out if I was in a Colts pre-draft meeting, it would be number 1, selflessness. This guy's a team player. If you look up a team player in the dictionary, don't be surprised if you see a picture of Brock Bowers. This guy checks himself at the door. This guy is all about team. This guy will sacrifice himself and make a block downfield for his teammate even. This guy runs decoy routes and clears out areas so other receivers can make catches. And this guy is a complete team player. And that's really what the game's about, is being a team. It's being a team. That's what it is. That's the concept of football. It's and why it was created in the first place. To back in the day, but I think it was created, from what I heard, to help young men prepare to go into battle, into war, and to become they form that team unit. A lot of years in college football, like Penn State, and that they didn't wear the names in the back of their jerseys. And Brock Bowers, he embraces that. He's a throwback. You could put a leather helmet on Brock Bowers, and he could play back in the day. Number 2 is competitiveness. This guy is uber competitive, like I've pointed out. This guy he's tenacious. He plays every play like it's his last, and he plays every play like it's an honor. It's the competitiveness. I've rarely seen this level of elite competitiveness out of any player, let alone a tight end. Most of these guys, they show up when they want to, and they don't show up when you need them. The third thing is that he opens things up, like I mentioned, for other receivers, which I think is key, especially in an offense like the Colts. They re-signed Pittman and stuff. The other receivers they have, this guy draws a lot of double coverage in college even, and he tracks, safeties, attention and things, which clears out areas for other receivers. So you're really getting a daily double with this guy, because he's not only going to catch the ball well he's not even going to, actually daily triple, I guess you could say, a new thing. He's not even going to catch well, block well, but he's also going to help, your other receivers on the game. I would take Brock Bowers before I would take any wide receiver in this draft. Unofficially at this point on this show, I'm going to come out and say this, but right now, as it stands tonight, we're on this show. I have him as my top player in my entire draft board.
Okay, I wasn't expecting to hear that tonight. That's pretty cool. So yeah, Colts, come on, let's go. Let's get this tight end. You've kind of just sold me on who I want the Colts to go get. So there we go to there. But another guy that you really like that the Colts have, they drafted last year. I think he was your number one receiver. He was definitely one of your favorite receivers. I don't know if he was your number one, but I think you said he was worth the first round pick.
Yeah, I had him at first round grade. Yeah.
Josh Downs.
Yes.
Josh Downs. How fortunate of us to get Josh Downs in the third round. How do you think he's going to play an impact on our offense?
I think he's going to have a huge role.
Yeah.
I was super excited about Josh Downs. This guy is wow. I mean, I loved him in North Carolina, and we can all see what he meant to Drake May. Who Drake May regressed in 2023.
Yeah.
Drake May's completion percentage went down. Drake May's game went down a notch or two. I had a top 5 grade. He was my QB2 heading into the process in this last season. Drake May was. He's dropped down to QB5 on my board. He did regress in 2023. I still have a first round grade on May, but he likes Josh Downs. He misses him, and what a difference he made. This year too. For Indianapolis. I mean, so he's a competitive guy. He's a fiery guy. He plays the game like it's important to him. That's one of the critical factors of scouting that Parcells had. He had 6 different criticals of scouting factors of scouting when I worked there. One of them was, is football important to him? The answer is a resounding yes with the Josh Downs, and they were extremely fortunate. You see, sometimes the media works for teams, and sometimes it works against teams. Like we talked about Anthony Richardson, they never should overhyped him as much as they did, but the media kind of ignored Josh Downs, which never made too much sense to me. And he did slide down to the third round, and there he is, and there he was, and there he goes. I really like Josh Downs. I think they someone needs to call 911 because they stole him.
That's good. I like that. I like those little things like that. But a lot of people comparing him to TY. Do you see it? Like he has some similar things. Like,
well, he reminded me. He's a guy that reminded me of a guy. Now it's old school. It's going back a few years, but I saw some Gary Clark in him back to play with the Washington Redskins back. He was my favorite receiver of all time. In fact, was Gary Clark back in the day. He's a guy that. He just plays the game exceptionally well, and he plays like he means it. And I can see how people make that comparison, and I can see why people are excited about him because he is just, he is really, he was a productive receiver in college. He was a consistent receiver in college. Is transferred to the NFL level. He was dominant in college in the short to intermediate route ranges. He was an accomplished route runner in college. These are, to me, he kind of reminded me of a Garrett Wilson, even with the Jets, who on Ohio State was a guy that, as a matter of fact, I think they both put up similar combine numbers as well. Downs and Wilson did. They also have somewhat similar size, I guess, in speed. I think Wilson ran a 4.38, Downs ran a 4.48. But it's just a guy that I think he's explosive, and I think people should be no matter who they compare him to. I mean that's a decent comp people are making. But this is a dynamic receiver. This is a difference maker. This is a guy that Colts fans should be really, really excited about. This is an example of their general manager, Chris Ballard, making a great choice. This is good scouting. This is whatever scout recommended him. This is good scouting. Whatever GM Ballard. I mean, this is a good process. They get a guy like Josh Downs in the third round is just really super exciting for the Colts fans, I would believe, because you're looking for guys to move the meter. And that's at the end of the day, like my mentor taught me, to stick with the dynamic ones, and Josh Downs is dynamic.
Yeah, I absolutely see it. As someone just watching the game, I see it. I see he's awesome. Like, it always seems like he's always open. It always seems he's very open. Like, he's not just a receiver getting open a little bit. It seems like he's really getting some separation. And I think AR really needs that, because he's going to see, the kind of openness we were talking about earlier. Downs is already going to be open, so it'd be easier for AR to see that. But so a couple of last questions here. I know you say don't mind being on too long, but I don't want to keep on dragging on. If there's a
Awesome.
general manager once, whether he's active, whether he was a GM in the past, whatever, is there a general manager that you look up to the most and that you would like to replicate if that's something that you do get into being a GM, is there a general manager that you would look up to the most and kind of like say, hey, I want to pick apart a lot of what he does. I want to pick apart this or that. Anyone that comes to mind?
Yeah, Bobby Beathard.
Okay.
That's the GM, the old GM of the Redskins. God rest his soul. He passed away recently, but I had a chance to meet Mr. Beathard a couple times, both as a kid when Dexter Manley invited me to the Redskins team hotel back when I was 13 years old, and also when I went out to meet with the Redskins in 2019 for a position out there. I had a chance to. Mr. Beathard was at the alumni meeting breakfast, and he was outside. I got a chance to take a picture with him and shake his hand again. I'm also friends with his son Jeff Beathard, and so it's to me, that's who I studied growing up. It was magical what he put together in Washington. To me, he was it's not just a bias or a fan talk. He was a guy that built all those Super Bowl teams in Washington with 3 number 1 draft picks in 11 years. Unheard of. Everyone's clamoring for the top 5 picks these days. Everyone's trying to trade up to number 1. Bobby Beathard did it with 3 number 1 draft picks, built really 4 Super Bowl teams with 3 different quarterbacks. Right? It was Theismann playing the first 2, and then it was Rippon in the third, or Williams in the third one with the Broncos, and then Rippon with the fourth one with Buffalo. Now Beathard did leave in '89, but that was still in essentially his team in '92 when Charlie Casserly's understudy took over. So I mean, he was a master. He was a visionary. He was a guy that was able to. He took a lot of lesser known players and was able to make a team that bonded together and played together as a team, and fought for each other, and an entire fan base and a city got behind and loved, and that it kind of became the DNA of that football franchise. But the passion, this is a guy that found Joe Gibbs. This is a guy, this is a guy. I mean, Joe Gibbs, we all know him today as a Hall of Fame coach. This is a guy, when Bobby Beathard, the way the story goes, when he walked into Jack Kent Cooke, who was the Redskins owner at the time, when he walked into his office and sat down and said, who do you recommend? He said, Joe Gibbs. And Jack Kent Cooke, an older, God bless his soul, I think was an Englishman. He sat up and he said, the way Joe Gibbs tells the story, he says, Joe who? That's what Mr. Cook said at the time. Joe who? But Beathard was that visionary that took a guy like a Joe Gibbs, brought him to Washington, and built this team of cast-offs and misfits. And Joe Gibbs is the only coach in NFL history that coached, won 3 different Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks, and they weren't household names. They weren't the Joe Montana, Bill Walsh years. It wasn't Terry Bradshaw, Chuck Noll years. It wasn't Tom Brady, Belichick years. It was with Joe Theismann, who was a cast-off from playing the CFL, that was signed by Washington. It was a guy like a Doug Williams who started in Tampa Bay with Joe Gibbs, and then ended up going to the USFL, and then Gibbs brought him back in and ended up leading him to the Super Bowl victory when he became Super Bowl MVP in Super Bowl 22 when they beat Denver 42-10, or a guy like Mark Rippon, who was a 6th-round draft pick out of Washington State. These are guys that were not well-known players, and that's who Bobby Beathard was. Bobby Beathard was a guy that showed up every day, according to a Sports Illustrated story, in a Hawaiian shirt, and in shorts. He was a surfer dude. He was a guy that, like me, I got tattoos. I kind of resonate with them. I wear bracelets and stuff. I don't wear a Rolo like Shador does, but but I wear hats. I'm different. I don't, it's and that kind of resonates with me. Bobby Beathard was his own man. He was comfortable in his own skin, and he was a guy that just grinded the tape. That's something I really respected. It's something I took note of even as a young boy in Minnesota. There was an article about him in Sports Illustrated with him sitting in front of a projector. He grinded the tape, and that's kind of where I kind of got that mentality from. Probably looking back at it, is from Bobby Beathard. And a matter of fact, this is a cool story, a funny story. I look back, and not funny, but a cool story is that when I first got to the Jets, the night before I flew back to Minnesota to get the rest of my belongings, we made the official move after about a month of me being on mini camps and stuff. Scott Pioli asked me to do a project on past general managers and what made them successful, kind of like what you're asking about this, the GM in my mind. And the project took me all night. And I remember sitting in the Jets office all night until the sun came up. And I remember thinking to myself, I walked down the hallway, nobody was there. I'm like, this is just like Joe Gibbs. This is just like Bobby Beathard. I'm doing this. This is happening. So those guys, Bobby Beathard is just a tremendous influence on me. How he built a team. He taught me so much about the art of chemistry, the team building, the importance of every single player you bring in is like an ingredient that you put into a recipe. Too much sugar, too much salt will ruin a recipe. You got to know who to bring in, who matches, who does, and there's so much of that. And it's kind of interesting when I trace back, because my NFL mentor, Lionel Vitale, was drafted by Bobby Beathard. And so, I look back at how my life traces and has worked out all these years, and it's just wild. It's mind blowing. But yeah, it's Bobby Beathard. I wrote it's on my website, First Round Mock. I wrote a tribute to Bobby Beathard's life when he passed away. And I love the man. I revere the man. I admire the man. And one day I hope to have the opportunity that man had.
Yeah. All right, man. I had a blast coming on here tonight, but if you have anything else you want to promote, you want to go ahead and shout out and talk about for a couple minutes, please go for it.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wrote a book too.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did. Right. I did. I wrote a book. I don't mind talking about a little shameless plug for a minute. Called Whatever It Takes. The true story of a fan making it into the NFL. It's available on Amazon. And the reason I'm bringing this up and what I'm going to conclude with is it is a story about my journey. It's a true story of a fan making to the NFL. If you go to whateverittakesbook.com, you can see the book. You can listen to the little sound clip and kind of give some background about the book and stuff. But it's a book about my journey, and it's a true story of a fan making the NFL. And that's really what I am, and essentially as a fan and making it into the league. But it's more than that. It's if there's anything I can communicate tonight, besides all the evaluations and stuff that we're talking about, it's right now, if you're watching this, maybe you have a dream. And it's something you've been wanting to do. And this is, and maybe people are telling you, like my dad told me, pick a real job. Maybe you got some discouragement in your years. Maybe you got, some people that, are kind of, talking against it. Maybe you don't know. Maybe your last name isn't Belichick. Maybe your last name isn't Lombardi. Like mine wasn't. I share my story. And like I said, my story's, I sucked at playing football, barely passed through high school, failed off a small community college, bounced around, went through a lot of hard times before I got into the NFL. And so my encouragement, and this is essentially what the book is why I wrote it. It took me 10 years to write. It's the hardest project of my entire life. It took me 10 years to write this book, 130 revised manuscripts. But really, at the end of the day, it's about inspiring you who's listening to your dream and to know that impossible is just a word in the dictionary. Anything is possible.
What's in the word impossible?
Possible.
Yep. All right. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, and that's where I land. That's where I land is that, our dreams are given to us for a reason. And like Mark Trestman, who I've known throughout the years, he told me once, Dan, if you can see it, you can achieve it. And so if you're sitting right now, thinking, well, yeah, I do have a dream. And this guy, he did this and that. That's great for him. But what does it mean for me? What it means for you, you can do it. Because if a small town kid like me with $2,300 in my pocket and a dream could make it to New York Jets, anything is possible. And so whatever your dream is, my encouragement to you is this: wave the punter off the field and go for it.
Yeah. We'll not forget it. We'll keep that in mind. Once again, truly appreciate you coming on. It was an honor. It was genuinely a good time. I was happy we got to talk some football for a little while. I felt like I was talking to someone genuine on the other side of the stream, not just someone trying to be like all. I think you know what I'm trying to say. A lot of people try to cast. Let's just stop there, but I truly appreciate you coming on. You're an inspiration. I read your story, guys. Make sure go to his website, check all this stuff out. Really, really a great story. Anything is possible. That's the message. So that's it for the live. Any last words?
Hey, thank you for listening, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your show and on your platform. It's been a lot of fun for me too. And again, my wife says thank you because now I got it all in my system for now.
All right, sounds good. I'll see you guys later. Peace out.